I see.
Elden Shadow of the Erdtree has been out for a few months now, and oh boy, there's a lot of different opinions on it, ranging from
how could FromSoft release it in this state? This is the worst thing they've ever made.
to
You good?
I skew very heavily towards the latter, but that isn't to say the DLC isn't without its flaws, which there are quite a few of, honestly. Although most of them barely affect the whole experience in my opinion. Now, while I was kind of considering doing a 3-hour long video over analyzing every inch of this DLC to the point of redundancy, I decided that that wasn't a good use of my time or yours. Instead, I'd like to focus specifically on the main attraction of the DLC for most players, which is the insane boss fights FromSoft cooked up. And when I say insane, I mean most of them took me at least a couple of hours to beat insane. I beat every FromSoft game that was available to me, and by the end of Dark Souls 3, the last Souls game I finished, I was able to beat Gale on my second try. Which in hindsight is kind of sad because I didn't get to fully learn his fight, but that's a different topic. When I started this DLC, thinking, how much harder can they make this? If I can beat Malenia, I can beat this no problem. I was very quickly humbled by even the first few fights I faced. Although I am talking about the bosses mainly, I will also mention the build up to the boss, be it the dungeon preceding it, how hidden it is, or their cutscenes if they have any. I think most of the time, people hyperfixate so much on the boss fights that they forget that these games are so much more than that. To me, Shadow of the Erdtree has the most consistent level design FromSoft has ever created for a game, which is extremely high praise for the people that made things like Boletaria, Anor Londo, and basically all of Sekiro. I want to really highlight just how impressive this accomplishment is, and how much, at least to me, the dungeons elevate the boss fights themselves. I will also be putting the bosses and the areas leading up to them in a tier list as I talk about them, for the fun of it. With that being said, let's start the analysis off with as most players' first main boss in the DLC, the Dancing Lion succeeds perfectly at kicking the shit out of anyone expecting anything close to Elden Ring's base game, including me. Ballarat is such a strong opening dungeon with a gorgeous aesthetic and atmosphere, and of course, great level design for the whole package. The two things stopping me from putting it straight into S tier is first off, the obligatory poison swamp they added.
It's a big area. Seems like a perfect place for a boss. Really? Really?
Now look, it's cool that you've got this completely optional, easily missable extra area. But could you for once resist the urge to taint an otherwise excellent dungeon with this unfun slog? Like, I wouldn't mind at all if you just shoved more poison swamps around the open world than you already did, and just left the dungeons alone. The second issue is that the dungeon feels like it ends a bit prematurely. I know it later connects to Enir Ilim in an awesome way, but it still feels like when I was just getting into the dungeon, I already got to the boss. I think adding one more layer or floor to the place and replacing the swamp with actual level design that connects back to the higher areas would make this dungeon almost perfect. Otherwise, it's still a high A tier dungeon. The mood and atmosphere built by Ballarat leads very well into the boss itself, but the build up is not really that different from what FromSoft is already known for. The cutscene for the Dancing Lion is sick. I especially love the sound design of its mechanical feeling movements, which make it feel menacing and foreboding.
Oh, so cool. Feet.
That stare as well is just terrifying. And the boss itself has a very complex moveset. Even only looking at his first phase, you have so much to learn, but all of it is very well telegraphed and fun to dodge. The grab is easily the most satisfying to dodge because of that sound effect it makes before biting you, leaving a big opening to attack it afterwards. The spinning tornado move is another highlight, although it can be quite frustrating to dodge when you're right next to the boss. And that's because of the camera. Without getting to the second phase, this is the main issue with this boss. It genuinely makes the fight harder than it otherwise would be. The lion changes elevations and moves so much that the camera just cannot keep up properly. It makes an otherwise well telegraphed fight more frustrating. Second phase, I'm really torn on. On the one hand, the spectacle is top tier. It is mostly the same fight, just with extra status effects. On the other hand, I don't like status effects in boss fights. I hated the lightning phase at first because it felt like the lightning coming out was very random and unfair, but honestly now I don't really think it's that bad. The ice one I was fine with at first, but now I dislike it more, particularly because of the ice that spawns when the lion does its basic combos. And the tornado phase is fine. Oh, and the music is peak. At this point in the DLC, I was still extremely stubborn and refused to use any Scadutree fragments at all. So I'm actually pretty proud that I managed to beat the lion without any fragments, after only a meager 3 hours. Although the boss was extremely hard because of that, it did make for a very memorable encounter. As a whole package, I would put the dancing lion in a strong A tier. Amazing spectacle, instantly memorable, great music, but the issues I mentioned stop it from being perfect. Rellana, the second boss I fought and my second roadblock out of many. Castle Ensis is solid. I think it's not big enough to really stand out, but as I said, the level design is very consistent across the whole DLC, so it's still very fun. I especially like its verticality. But as a whole, this feels like a very standard build-up and dungeon to a boss, so I'd give it a solid B. Now, Rellana is a difficult one. On one hand, she's my favorite kind of boss. Humanoid with no added BS like weird arenas or bad camera controls. Complex moveset that still has plenty of openings you can find. However, I hate projectiles, and she has so many of them. Sometimes they are timed in such a way that you get rushed down by her while the projectiles are flying towards you, and I really don't find that fun. It makes her feel a little inconsistent, even though otherwise she's great. I also think the amount of extra damage she gets in her second phase, even from the same basic attacks, is a bit overtuned. I love the difficulty, but I firmly believe it should stem from more moves or combos, rather than this attack now 2-shots you even though it was fine before. And this isn't even the worst case of that. The Twin Moon attack is awesome. It's kinda guaranteed to kill you the first time you see it, but it's so satisfying to jump over and it's a great spectacle, as all of her phase 2 is. I really like the music but don't think it's top tier, and her armor design is awesome. It is disappointing that she didn't get a cutscene, as she very easily deserves one. It makes the fight feel a little less special because of that. Rellana took me 4 hours to beat, and boy were they miserable, but I can't deny when a boss is great, even if my first experience was a little troubling. She also gets an A from me. The Golden Hippo was definitely one of the bosses in the DLC. In all honesty, I don't get the hate for him. He took me a couple of tries, he really wasn't that bad. I just feel like he doesn't deserve a whole boss fight. He has literally zero build-up. You just go up the Shadowkeep elevator and you're fighting him. The game would neither be better nor worse without him.
Curse you, Bayle!
Bayle is without a single doubt in my head the greatest dragon fight FromSoft has conceived. From the complex but completely fair moveset, to the music, to the absolutely peak visual design, to the greatest NPC in any game, to the build up to the fight, it's all perfect. First you explore a small but fun cave. It then leads to the appropriately named jagged peak. The scale of this oppressive hostile mountain is an absolute spectacle and feels like a mini dungeon in itself. which gives the whole area an extremely distinct feel compared to most other ones. The closer you get, the more the tension rises until it culminates in Bayle's boss fight. Is there a lot to do in this area? No. Are the encounters leading up to Bayle good? Not really. The dragons fighting each other are cool, but that's pretty much it. Do I care about any of that? No. Because this whole place is designed to lead to Bayle, and it succeeds perfectly in that purpose. That's why it is S tier. The first time I went through this area was the greatest gaming experience I've ever had.
Nah, I'm gonna do it this attempt.
Okay, I'll watch it. Full screen.
Can you summon?
Oh, bro.
Yo, that was close though. The way he just stood back into the middle because he knows I'm gonna come back the next round.
Bayle himself is practically perfect. I don't like dragon fights that much for two reasons. One, dragons give very few opportunities to hit their head, which is usually the weak spot for them, and the hitboxes are very unintuitive to begin with. And far worse is two, fire breathing attacks are not fun at all. The dragon is usually unhittable as it flies away from you, and unless you can predict the attack like 5 seconds before it happens, you will get hit by the fire. It is a total mood and pace killer. From Software somehow found a way to solve both of these issues. They made even fire breathing attacks fun to dodge for the first time, which is baffling to me. I don't know how to accurately explain why Bayle works so well, but the way he moves and finishes his attacks feels so right, like you're always able to get a hit on his head. Honestly, it's harder to hit his other parts than his head. Spectacle wise, this is also the best dragon boss easily. His whole second phase had my jaw on the floor from beginning to end, even on repeat playthroughs. Add the GOAT himself, Egon, into the mix, and you know exactly why this is already the most iconic and memorable moment in Elden Ring. He took me roughly 3 hours, but he was such a fun boss to learn, especially thanks to Egon always hyping me up to fight him again. S tier. Putrescent is a very unique boss in its every aspect. Stone Coffin Fissure is the area that precedes him, and my god, this is one of the most breathtaking locations in this game. And I know you can say that about 90% of the places, but the fissure is special. As this is basically Saint Trina's home, everything is surrounded with this purpley hue representative of the sleep status effect. The level design makes you continually descend deeper and deeper into the fissure, almost like falling into a deep sleep. Everything serves a purpose, especially the relaxing yet unnerving ambience. Despite how much praise I have for this place, I do think it's a little undercooked. Just like some other dungeons, it ends prematurely right when you really get into the swing of exploration, and that stops it from reaching that S tier. It's still a solid A. Putrescent Knight complements this build up very well. You do the classic FromSoft trope of dropping into the abyss, and this time it's a gorgeous boss arena that looks very similar to Metyr's, and you go straight into the very somber and mesmerizing fight. Despite Putrescent Knight's distinct design, he's actually a horseback boss, and just like dragons, I'm not always a fan of these kinds of bosses, as you will soon see. However, this is an exception.
Alright, dodge that.
Oh, let him go.
I don't dodge any of that. I don't know what I just did, genuinely.
Just like everything else about this boss, his moveset is quite unique, with many of his moves flowing into each other. It's actually very fitting for the lore, and the music is great, which I appreciate. However, it still falls into the same problem with other horseback bosses, which is how annoying it is to fight them when they keep moving away from you. Something about the hitboxes makes this sort of fight very frustrating to deal with at times, when you miss 4 or 5 punishes in a row. Attack wise though, I don't see many problems, except when he activates his close range fire cone when you're right under him. That is just straight up unfair. Otherwise a solid B tier since I'm still biased against horseback bosses.
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of life?
Messmer is the boss of the DLC. He was heavily marketed, he's on the box art, and that's for good reason. He's preceded by Shadowkeep, which I would confidently put in my top 5 favorite From Software areas. It is that good. There are multiple ways it connects to the open world meaningfully, with unique sections of the keep you wouldn't see otherwise. Most people will go from the main entrance with a Hippo. After exploring the lower floors, you reach the Specimen Storehouse, which is really the main attraction here. It's multi-layered, it has so many secrets, and it's very meaty in terms of length and content. Its level design is perfection. The only criticism I have is it could use 1 or 2 extra enemy types to vary it up more, but I still think it does very well with what it has. At the top of the dungeon you reach a giant door that you know houses the demigod himself, and it feels so foreboding to finally reach it. Easiest S tier in the game. In an unexpected twist to me, Messmer is basically just the halfway mark of the DLC. But that's not to undersell just how good of a fight this is. The cutscene is iconic. I can't stop saying
Mongrel intruder
in his voice to my friends. It's up there with Egon in terms of quotability. You also get a rare From Software homescotty. The cutscene sets up Messmer's character very well. Once you get into the fight, you immediately get this oppressive and somber atmosphere through the music that calls back to Radahn, basically confirming whose child Messmer is. Now genuinely, I don't have a single issue with his attacks. Each one is beautifully animated and creates an unforgettable spectacle. The sound design on his grab attack is so punchy that I feel like I'm getting impaled in real life. All his combos have plenty of openings you can find, but never let you get too comfortable attacking or healing. The long combo that ends with the spears in the ground is so satisfying to dodge. His second phase cutscene is equally as great. The voice acting here is genuinely incredible. Messmer sounds like Margit in some of his lines, which makes him that much more menacing. I love the imagery of the snake's shadow engulfing Marika's statue, which is just great visual storytelling. Now some people criticize his snake attacks in phase 2, but I really don't see why. I picked up on the timings pretty quickly, and the crunchy sound you get when you hit the snake form makes the attacks even better. The giant explosion he starts the phases with is also a big highlight. A really underrated factor people overlook is how fun a boss is to learn, as some great bosses I mentioned before and will mention are not that fun to learn but then feel great to fight. Messmer on the other hand was some of the most fun 2 hours I have had in this game. Everything really just clicks about this boss. Easy S tier. The Scadutree Avatar is one of many hidden bosses in this DLC. It can be reached from another area inside Shadowkeep, the Church District. When I talked about the size of the dungeon, this is what I was referring to. You've almost got a whole extra dungeon that hides multiple extra bosses within the Shadowkeep. It just proves why this is one of my favorite areas ever. The Scadutree Avatar's arena is genuinely one of the coolest in the game. The fight takes place right in front of the Shadow Tree, and the yellow-black aesthetic and just the way the tree looks is so cool. I really like the boss's design as well. I don't think we've ever had a sunflower boss in a Souls game before, especially one that can charge at you like a freight train. Speaking of which, this boss I feel leans into more of a comedic style than From Software's usual designs. Apart from the fact that it's a literal flower fighting you, you got the previously mentioned rush attack and how it just smacks its face into the ground. Great stuff. I do think all the thorns appearing on the ground can get annoying sometimes though. This is also the only 3-phase fight in the game, although it is kinda weird that another sunflower just spawns in when the previous one dies. The avatar doesn't change visually, but I think each phase's new moves are distinct enough to warrant the 3rd phase. And while I don't have many big issues with the boss, I also don't think it is too outstanding in any one department, except maybe its visual design. It took me around an hour to beat, and I enjoyed it enough for a B tier.
My name is...
There are only 3 bosses I actively dislike in this DLC, which is a testament to its quality. Since I'm mentioning this, I think you can guess that I absolutely hate this guy, and he's only the 2nd worst in terms of my enjoyment. I will start with the positive. I really like how well hidden he is. Maybe it's to make sure less people find him, but it is cool that he's also reached from a secret place in the Shadow Keep. Coming from the church district, you can reach the higher floors of the specimen storehouse. Here you go through another FromSoft trope, moving along the support beams at the top of a building. You then go on an elevator and reach the back of the keep where Gaius is located. This boss is just Gyobu from Sekiro, but worse in practically every single way. His music is forgettable. He's just a guy in a boar. The boar is cool though. His moveset is annoying as hell. He has no voice lines, no cutscenes, multiple moves are absolutely dog shit, and to top it off, his only purpose is to be an obstacle for 5 Scadutree fragments. You can fight him on a horse, which is cool in practice. However, he does so much damage to it that basically any attacks will 2-shot the horse, after which you have like a 90% chance to die after you fall. Despite this, I did beat him entirely on a horse, and honestly it was slightly more fun to figure out how to dodge on the horse because no other boss has made me do that before. Gaius' favorite attack is his boar rush, which has a stupid hitbox that either requires a really precisely timed roll or whatever I do here on the horse to dodge it. Either way, I really dislike it, especially the fact that if you touch even a pixel of the boar's body, you get hit.
Game. How are you supposed to dodge that move, for example? Oh, cool. Love that. Spamming! What?
His 2nd phase moves I really don't like either. None of the added moves allow for any opening to attack him and are just designed to prolong the fight. The biggest problem is when he summons the spikes from the ground. I do not understand how this attack made it in. The spikes are summoned too fast to even run away on a horse, let alone on foot. The only way I managed to dodge this attack is to double jump over Gaius, and somehow that worked. He took me about 90 minutes to beat, but it felt like an eternity in that boss arena.
Yeah. Oh my god. This might be... I can't even... I don't even know what to say. That was atrocious. It was terrible. I can't believe how bad that was. I'm so through. Why? Why? I can't. I've lost the desire to play today.
I absolutely despise this boss as it left a very sour taste when everything else up to that point had been great. Back-to-back bad bosses. Let's go! I can't believe they are still trying the summoner boss trope. It was never fun and will never be fun. I really like the catacomb preceding this boss though, as it is unexpectedly large and gives that vibe of descending to somewhere you shouldn't go. There are a ton of secrets to find, and the darkness gimmick gives it a unique flair that's not frustrating to deal with. I love the comically large Plants vs Zombies pea shooter before the boss as well. Hilarious idea, executed well. As a dungeon it would be around B, but for Catacomb standards it's honestly closer to A for me. As for the boss itself, well, I like the music. Honestly, I don't have much to say about him. He's going straight into D tier. D for don't make another summoner boss from software, please, I beg you, don't do it. There have been some phenomenal bosses so far, with amazing build-ups, great music, fun movesets, the whole lot. But to me, as a whole package, one stands above them all, and you have to go through many hoops to get to him. It all starts in, you guessed it, the Shadow Keep. This time though is the most secretest of all the secrets in the dungeon. If you explore thoroughly, you can stumble across an inconspicuous ladder, after which you have to go deeper into the keep and through an invisible wall to get to another coffin. From Software really never changes. But that's not all. You end up in a lower section of the Shadow Altus, and after a ton of exploring and more descending, you reach the Darklight Catacombs, the dungeon I just talked about in the Jori section. After you defeat Jori, you gain access to the Abyssal Woods, a poorly disguised Bloodborne arena. It is both hilarious and terrifying when you get the prompt that Torrent is too scared to be summoned. On my first playthrough, I would easily give this place an S. Visually, it's probably my favorite place in the DLC, and the atmosphere is immaculate. However, it is very empty and very boring to go through after that first experience. The area is just way too big to traverse on foot. I think it would have benefited immensely if it was cut down to be way more linear and focused on its strengths, which are the sparsely placed stealth sections. They could have done a lot more with them to make it more engaging to go through the woods and to make repeat treks faster. So unfortunately the Abyssal Woods are probably a C. What's not disappointing is Midra's Manse, a short but perfect dungeon. Immaculate atmosphere, visually on point. I wish it was longer of course, but I still think its spacing is great. It's not the most intricate, but it is an easy S.
Bro, I learned the whole speech by the way. I'm not joking. I learned the whole
You
speech.
crazy.
Curse you, Bayle. I hereby vow. I forgot, wait.
As a whole, this is the longest and most rewarding build-up to a boss FromSoft has created. It is similar to Bayle, but even more immersive. The constant descent into a growingly more oppressive atmosphere and the secrecy of the location is what edges it out for me. What awaits at the end? An old guy screaming in agony. Of course, once you kill him, you actually start the boss with one of the coolest lore reveals, being another Lord of Frenzied Flame than the one the Tarnished can become. And my god, everything up to this was so worth it. The music, oh my god, I want to gush about the music. This is without a single doubt in my mind my favorite piece in all of Elden Ring, maybe even Souls games as a whole. It is thematically brilliant, oddly catchy despite how dissonant it is, and so grandiose and elegant in a twisted way. I can't praise the composers enough for this brilliant piece of music. The visual design, also peak. Midra's animations are so fluid and flow into each other seamlessly, making for a visual treat that's just as fun to actually engage with. Once again, all of his moves are fair, fun to learn, with plenty of punish windows. The fire effects are awesome. It is so satisfying. I honestly don't even have anything else to say. It's cinema. If I had to muster up a complaint, I just wish you didn't have to go through the frail old man phase every time you fought him. But that's basically nothing compared to this masterpiece. Everything surrounding Metyr I'm quite torn on. I love how much you need to explore to get to her. having to search around the map for finger ruins, one of which is extremely well hidden. But at the same time, the finger ruins themselves are some of the most disappointing locations in the game. There's absolutely nothing to do there except blow the finger horn. Thank you FromSoft for making me say that. Visually and atmosphere-wise, it's amazing, but it's not enough to make up for how let down I was once I actually started exploring around the ruins. It gets a C, and that's purely because of how amazing it looks. Despite my disappointment, I do think as a build-up it works quite well. Once you discover that a third finger ruin was right under the cathedral and check it out, you are greeted to one of the most what the fuck moments I've had in a FromSoft game. It feels like you are not supposed to be witnessing what is in front of you, more so than anything in the abyssal woods. The endless watery void, the creature or being in the distance slumbering. It is such a striking image that I am amazed by it to this day. Visually, it is an absolute treat of a design, and musically as well. It serves the purpose of highlighting the otherworldly nature of this fight. And the final thing FromSoft nailed is the lore. I won't get into it as there are plenty of videos you can find on it, but the insane lore implications of fighting this boss absolutely blew me away. As peak as all of this is, there is one small problem though, and that is Metyr's second phase, which ruins an otherwise fantastic experience. I don't know what they were thinking with most of the attacks in phase 2.
I don't know. I think it's like a bug because they buried it anyway, and I staggered it so much. Does your weapon even stagger?
No. Why is that there?
The small guy.
But it drops the quality of the whole boss 1 or 2 letter grades for me. The first phase, while annoying at first, is quite fair. My only issue is her finger crawling attack when you're on her sides. If you're not far away already, there's practically no way not to get damaged by it. But second phase? Oh man. You got the spinning attack, which is admittedly hilarious to look at, but extremely unfun. I don't even know how to dodge it yet. Then you have the triple laser move. The first 2 lasers are perfectly fine, but the third one comes just fast enough to be undodgeable. Unless I'm missing something, I also don't know how to dodge it fully. And then you have the one move to rule them all, the giant black hole laser beams. Again, gorgeous spectacle, but what the hell are you supposed to do to avoid the first one? The second laser is fine for some reason. It's only the first one which feels like it reaches the whole arena. Unless someone can show me how to dodge these moves, or I'm really stupid, the second phase is a mess and drops Metyr down to a middling B tier. Romina is a great boss stuck in between several fantastic bosses, so she often gets overlooked. Preceding her is the very interesting pseudo-open world, pseudo-dungeon area of Raoh. I remember in an interview Miyazaki said that they tried to more seamlessly blend the open world and legacy dungeons in the DLC. And while you could see this approach with places like Jagged Peak, Raoh is the most legacy dungeon of them all. The bulk of the area consists of giant maze-like ruin interiors with tons of verticality and possible pathways to the boss. I really enjoyed traversing the place to an extent, but all the floors feel a bit too samey visually, leading to some frustration and getting lost. I do really like the rot theme present once you get close to Romina, but I think the ruins needed a few more distinct landmarks to prevent all the hallways from blending with each other. The rot also serves as a foreshadowing element to the upcoming boss fight that makes the build-up feel very natural, as you go from lush green areas and deserted ruins to more and more scarlet rot-ridden spots. Raoh felt less empty than some other areas, probably due to its dungeon qualities, as it hides plenty of rewarding secrets that require the player to pay close attention to level geometry. The biggest secret is of course the second dancing lion, but I think it would be better for everyone if we didn't get into that. I really respect FromSoft for trying something new with this area, and for bonus points, the outside vistas look absolutely breathtaking. A tier. Although the dungeon works as a build-up, what doesn't is the lack of a cutscene for a required boss fight. Now Rellana I can still understand, she's optional and still kind of works without a cutscene, as it feels like a duel that doesn't need any preparations. Romina is not the same. She's blocking your path to the final area of the game, so not knowing anything about her or why she's there protecting the tree feels anticlimactic. And yes, her lore when you read about it is really cool and gives more insight, but this is a case where that's not enough. You need to give a direct reason for me to care about this fight. From Software are already masters at this if you look at practically any boss cutscene from their catalog, including this same DLC. Apart from that, this is a great fight that iterates on Quelaag and Najika by mashing them together. The highlight of the fight is the presentation. The arena is simple but effective. The hot pink aesthetic is eye-catching and distinct in an already very colorful game. All of the animations feel so smooth and satisfying to dodge. The butterfly effects in Phase 2 are gorgeous, while still being readable and fair to dodge. The music is great, especially the second phase. It uses Millennia's motif beautifully while still having its own identity. And while all of this is great and all, the core issue of the fight is it is not that impactful. Maybe that's due to what I mentioned before, or the other bosses are just so insanely good that she's overshadowed by them. Whatever the case, it's a great fight, but nothing more than that. I don't have any strong memories of fighting her, or an emotional connection to her music, so she gets a B tier.
That was not fun. That was maybe the least fun match I've had.
This is the third and final fight I dislike. I don't even know if this counts as a unique boss fight, but it has its own music and is required to proceed, so I guess it works out. Honestly, I just want to complain about it. But first, you have to go through the heavenly atmosphere of Enir Ilim. I don't know how FromSoft keeps one-upping themselves in terms of art direction and visuals. I mean, what can I even say? Just look at it. Just listen to that ambience. In terms of level design though, I am a bit torn. I think there are some really cool sections, like everything up to the bridge with the lion guy is completely fine, as well as the rooftops. But then the mages that block the staircase after the bridge are atrocious. Enemy placements in general are mostly abundantly placed reused enemies. I really like the lightning and wind lion soldiers, as they provide a great challenge. But the ice variant may be the least thought out enemy type in the whole DLC. It creates a huge radius of ice around it that constantly damages you if you're in it. The catch is that the lion also does a long combo that keeps him on you even if you try to run away. And since you're on a rooftop, there is nowhere to run. The damage is so extremely overtuned that you die in mere seconds, making it feel like they actively don't want you to fight this guy. My favorite part about this dungeon is how intertwined it is with Ballarat, with multiple places where the two dungeons connect, and an especially cool parkour section that leads to an awesome weapon. This segues nicely into my next issue, which is the disappointingly short length for a final dungeon. When I pondered why it felt like this, I realized that Ballarat and Enir Ilim would have worked wonderfully as one legacy dungeon. Combining them into one large dungeon would work as their aesthetics are very similar, and they're literally placed on top of each other, and are already quite connected. The progression could be redesigned to block the main entrance into Ballarat and let you in only after you defeat Romina. Not only would the lion work as a midway boss in a dungeon like that, it would serve to highlight the feeling of ascending a godly place much better, as you would start from a much lower point on the map. The more I think about it, the more I wish this is how it went down. Unfortunately though, I can't give Enir Ilim more than a B as it is. What can't be fixed is the first fight this dungeon leads up to. FromSoftware is known for iterating on established ideas and mechanics, like with Romina right before this. However, some ideas should just be left behind. Gank and PC fights are one such example. Instead, FromSoft made their most, let's say, ambitious NPC fight yet. There are many variables that go into how this fight can play out, and I just so happened to get the worst possible one. Conceptually, this is really interesting. Depending on how you interact with the characters in the DLC and which questlines you did, you will be fighting against and alongside certain characters. In practice though, each NPC is extremely tanky, with atrociously frustrating overtuned spells and long range attacks, and you may have to fight up to 5 NPCs, as I did. Now this wouldn't be so bad if the game gave you ample time to beat one of the NPCs before the next one shows, but of course that's not what happens. It starts off okay with just Freya, but before you can even get her to half health, you're already fighting a second NPC. You can summon Ansbach and Theolir, and definitely should. I give up on the idea of soloing them very fast, but they have a long delay before spawning. This means you are always disadvantaged as the enemies severely outnumber you. That's not to mention that Theolir is completely useless apart from distracting the AI. Ansbach is goated though. So what this means is the fight starts off as a 1v2, and shortly after Ansbach joins it turns into a 2v3. Once you defeat any one of them, another one instantly spawns in. I just don't understand what they were thinking with this. Any good things about this fight, like the amazing spectacle and dialogue exchanges, gorgeous soundtrack and cool arena, are completely overshadowed by how unfair everything feels. Oh, and by the way, everyone except Hornsent has a healing flask, just because the fight wasn't miserable enough. This is by far the worst fight in the DLC, and it's not even close. But with that, we finally reach
What am I doing? Why did I...
Stop spamming!
Prime Moon.
Prime Radahn, one of the most divisive bosses ever. Some people really dislike even the concept of a Radahn rematch, but I personally think it is very hype, and it's not like it comes out of nowhere. There's plenty of dialogue you can find about Miquella's goals that practically spoiled the final boss. His cutscene calls back to the Elden Ring trailer where he fights Millennia. It's his signature pose and it exudes immense aura. The first phase is awesome, another one of the best OSTs FromSoft has made. Star Scourge Radahn is my favorite piece from the base game, and hearing a more heroic rendition of it gives me goosebumps to this day. People complain that his combo strings are way too long, but I think it is fairly manageable in phase 1. He has such a wide range of attacks he can do that are overwhelming to learn, but I think it's an extremely satisfying fight once you do learn them. There is one single attack that kind of ruins the momentum of the fight when he does it, and I don't even need to say what it is because everyone already knows. FromSoft, what were you thinking? The only way to dodge it is changing your whole build around an obscure talisman, or performing a backstep into a dodge that without a guide no one would figure out. And even then it's a nightmare to actually perform because of how fast the cross slash comes out. Despite how terribly designed this attack is, it doesn't affect phase 1 too much for me, as you can reasonably tank it if he only does it once or twice. By the end of my time with him, I could do his phase 1 consistently hitless, except the cross slash of course, almost every attempt. And I had to do that many times because of phase 2. As cool as the cutscene is, it's disappointing how little Miquella there is in the DLC, despite it entirely revolving around him. You don't even really fight him as he just sits on top of Radahn. I wish there was a little more interaction with Miquella, be it a phase or a cutscene or whatever. The music in phase 2 kind of makes up for that though. Now phase 2 is where most problems with the boss creep up. The visuals are insane. Too insane, in fact, as I still can't always tell what the hell is going on screen. There are so many effects at any given time, and Miquella's hair by itself already blocks half the screen. Then you have all the light effects coming out whenever Radahn does any attack, and at this point you just sit there and contemplate why you even made it this far just to get a seizure. Not only do the light effects make looking at the boss harder, they also make fighting him more annoying. Even if you know how to dodge them, by rolling into Radahn at an angle, they still sometimes hit you and make it extremely hard to tell what attack he will do next. The camera staring right at Radahn's crotch at all times does not make it any better. Not enough people talk about the T-pose nuke attack, because in my opinion that is the second most egregious move in his arsenal. You get half a second of reaction time to get out of the AoE. If you're doing anything except gluing your eyes to Radahn's animations, you are guaranteed to get hit by it. His holograms are hit or miss. This one you can just stay still inside of him and be perfectly fine. The one after the meteors is frustrating and inconsistent, because depending on the direction of the meteor attack, you might not even have space to run away from the holograms. His other nuke attack he does at around 30% health is also stupid. There's practically no way to avoid it unless you know beforehand what to do, because he lands the nuke nearly instantaneously. The main 2 points I want to get across about Prime Radahn is 1. His second phase is one of the most frustrating things to learn, as you have to go through hours of his first phase just to die in 5 seconds in phase 2. And 2, I kind of really love this boss now. I know it sounds completely contradictory to everything I've said, but I don't know. After all the misery, I just find it satisfying when you know what to do against him. In the end, Radahn took me 190 tries across nearly 9 hours. I stuck to my Rellana swords till the bitter end, and the pure, overwhelming flow of emotions I got when God Fell showed up on my screen will not be replicated in a long time, if ever.
Can't watch it anymore. Are you happy?
The whole DLC was such an important experience to me. It rejuvenated my desire to improve myself and work on projects such as this one at a time when I was stagnating in my room every day. I'm still doing that to an extent, but at least now I find it easier to get myself to work on something. This game and boss have made me make a step to improve my life, and all this motivation and emotions I got from fighting a big red-haired guy in a game for hours a day. Radahn still doesn't quite make it to S though. And that is Shadow of the Erdtree. If you enjoyed my rambling, please consider liking and subscribing. As much motivation as this game gave me to make videos, I would greatly appreciate supporting the channel in any way if you want to see more videos. Thank you for watching.